I've never been predisposed towards self-pity, and when I say that, I don't mean that it's because I haven't suffered trauma or had, hardships, or had to endure hardships or anything. It's simply that I guess the way I'm predisposed towards, I guess, confrontation and sense of confronting things. So even now, when I look back on situations that were at one time traumatic, you know, I immediately confront them in prayer. I go to God and I say, okay, look, let's work through this. This happened. This is how I saw it at the time, and blah, 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 blah. So I'm not one whose predisposition is towards feeling sorry for myself, sulking or having a pity party. However, that isn't to say that in the moments when I was actually experiencing those traumas that they didn't have a definitive effect on me. Because when I look back on some of these things and I assess my conduct, I assess my choices in that moment, I can see how informed they were by the trauma. So while I can say now that, on reflection, I can handle those things with a greater deal of maturity, what I know better now and what I probably wish I could have known then is essentially that both the truth and a lie require oxygen to grow. And what I mean by that is both truth and lies need to be sustained. So for example, if somebody says something about me that is untrue and unkind, but untrue, let's prioritize untrue, them saying it does not make it true. However, if I continue to feed that by reviewing it, rehashing it, repeating it, revisiting it, then I'm giving it life. And the life I'm giving it kind of creates its presence or establishes its presence in my life simply by me feeding it, not by it suddenly becoming true. In the same way that, if somebody said something, critiqued me in a way that wasn't pleasant, but was actually necessary and constructive, the fact that I didn't enjoy hearing it doesn't make it untrue. But if I keep playing that guilt and pity card and rehashing how it's untrue, then I can actually lose the value of that. But I think most importantly, I think it applies mostly to the areas where what you actually needed to hear, what you ought to have been told. Because all of us, particularly some who come from the kind of cultural background I do, there were deficits, particularly emotional, in terms of the way we were brought up. There were, things, affection wasn't always forthcoming, words of affirmation weren't always, free flowing, even went through seasons where that literally children must be seen but not heard. So they weren't always the most emotionally healthy places. And so a lot of us have come through life with deficits in terms of things we ought to have been told, ought to have been heard. But in the same way, as I said earlier, not being told when you were 5, when you were 12, when you were 21, that you are lovely, that you are loved, doesn't now make that untrue. It doesn't mean that if it's at 35, if it's at 55, you finally stumble onto that truth that you are loved. The fact that you didn't hear when you were 5 doesn't make it untrue. But just as in an ideal world, that truth would have been sustained by us repeatedly hearing it, by us repeatedly being told, by us being repeatedly reminded by someone whose voice we trusted. That same truth still applies now. We still have to pursue and create environments in which those truths are reinforced in our hearing and in our lives, because we do need to know what is true. What God ultimately says about us is what is true, but we do ultimately need to surround ourselves with reminders of that truth, because that is the only way. Otherwise, we can keep looking and hoping and hoping that somebody else will come and do for us what the responsibility to do has been transferred to us. So it's something that I know now that I could have used knowing when I was 19, when I was 15, when I was 25, that the truth and the lie will be sustained by being fed. And then I would have been able to make a better choice about discovering and prioritizing what was true, regardless of how I felt about it in the moment, and dismissing what was untrue, even if it felt comfortable at the time. God bless you.